Good morning, everybody. If you don't, how many people know or are readers of InsideClimate News? Okay, definitely not enough. So let me just tell you who we are briefly before I get into my presentation. We're going to be 10 years old this year. We are probably the largest environmental newsroom in the country. We started with 2 people. We're now 14. And our budget is probably a rounding error for most media organizations. We're a nonprofit, but we do incredibly high impact work. In 2013, we won a Pulitzer Prize for national reporting. Last year, we were finalists for a Pulitzer Prize for public service. And we've been doing accountability journalism around the climate issue. If you're not a reader, let me recommend you just sign up for our weekly newsletter that gives you the week in review and start there. It's a good way to see what you could bring to your communities in terms of accurate, fact-based, independent news from a nonprofit around climate change. So my talk today, my remarks really are trying to understand why there is so much confusion in America around the reality of climate change. How did it happen? Why did it happen? And why is it going to keep happening unless we do something about it? I think we need to understand that if we are going to understand how to talk to our communities and how to revive a real conversation. So, let me see. There we go. So this is an article Business Week ran on the top companies that are reducing their CO2 emissions. And it was a bit of a contest among these companies, and it was a ranking. Now, what I want you to notice is in the corner, the date of this article is 2005. And I contributed research to this work, and it was a time when the nation was moving toward rational scientific discussion, policy discussion, to develop a federal law so that we could begin to address climate change. It wasn't just the green groups, it was all the stakeholders in our society, and that bill, with all its flaws and everything, got as far as passage in the House of Representatives in 2009, 2010. So what happened? Now we have an administration that is trying to roll back all the progress, or they say they are, that is the incremental progress that has been made, and as if this problem does not exist. What happened in those intervening 10 years when the leading corporations of this country and the entire Congress and the political system was engaged in a serious discussion around solving this issue and solving a problem that has been largely, right, historically, this country is the largest emitter of greenhouse gases, right? So we have huge responsibility for ourselves and to the rest of the world to solve this problem. What happened? So in a word, fake news. Now, I'm not talking about the fake news that we saw in the last election cycle. I'm talking about the fake news that has been manufactured around the climate issue for 2 decades. We've been living in a fake news world as journalists for a very long time. Fake news is an old story, and I'm going to try and take you back in time because it doesn't start with the climate issue. It has been a staple of, it's been an American staple for a very long time, okay? And it's not something I think we recognize and appreciate enough. The work we did on Exxon and their knowledge of climate change that was a Pulitzer finalist. If you're not familiar with the story, the short version is this. In the 70s, late 70s, the chief scientist of Exxon stood before the board of directors of the company and told them climate change from greenhouse gas emissions is going to be a huge problem, and we have to address it. And the company embarked on research in collaboration with academia and government and became a leader of climate change research. Fast forward 10 years, and they changed their posture. They continued to do some climate research, but what they engaged in was a program to contribute to the manufacture of fake news around the uncertainty of climate change and and things their scientists had confirmed. So this is not a new story in the environmental news arena. This is a familiar playbook that lots of companies and industry has engaged in to manufacture uncertainty around science that would cause inconvenient policy. And I listed a bunch of other arenas in which this game is played. And yet, we have not gotten wise yet to this playbook. So there's a degree to which our ways of working creates complicity in this game, which is not serving us well. Let me take you back to 1928. Do you know who Edward Bernays is? He was the nephew of Sigmund Freud. He popularized Freud's ideas in the United States, but he learned a lot from his uncle. And it had to do with how to manipulate people. And he is the grandfather of public relations. It's notable that he didn't call the book he wrote about it public relations. He called it propaganda. And from those early days, there's a direct line from him to the marketing of not just products, but politicians and ideas and policy positions and fake news. Okay? And those quotes that I'm putting up, I'm letting you read them on your own because they're quite chilling. It's a very different point of view about how society should be run. That's very different from what we in journalism believe an informed, engaged, rational, critical thinking citizen should do. This is an important view. Amy, in the previous session, talked about the future. This is looking at the past and how we got here. And history is going to repeat itself unless we do something, right? The first time is tragedy. The second time is farce. I'm going to skip this because So this is a disturbing slide to me when I put it together, because what it shows is the power of the manufacture of, we can call it fake news, and the failure of us to appreciate three, I'll start with the first three, tremendously important stories that have huge effects on the lives of so many people. The war on drugs, thanks to the book by Michelle Alexander, we now know, was a program that resulted in the mass incarceration of people of color. It's a story that was completely missed. The weapons of mass destruction. That was more fake news that led us into one of the costliest, most expensive wars. The climate change problem. The same thing. We've had 40 years to begin addressing the problem in a rational way without hurting our economy and so on, and we haven't done it. Fake news. Now, the election story was missed, and I think this is one of the reasons why. These are slightly dated slides, but 10 years ago, there were 55,000 journalists working in about 1,400 daily news organizations, daily newspapers around the country. Now there are 30,000. We're about half, in other words, the local news has been hollowed out of this country. So, of course, we didn't know what was going on in all these small places that didn't have any journalists anymore. I mean, that's part of the picture here. So there's this financial crisis and this war. This is a brochure. So you have this development of public relations and fake news. Now there's a new aggressive stance toward the media that they've taken the gloves off. This is a brochure from a Washington area PR firm that is promising to deal with the aggressors, right? We're the aggressors. Journalists are aggressors, right? And this is really where it's ended up. That stance, that approach, that disregard, the attempt to delegitimize media, is now in the White House, coming from the White House. So this is what we have to contend with and understand around these issues that we care about and see what's going on. The last thing I just want to show you, I've got 30 seconds. So that's our staff. They're honest human beings, despite what the president has said about us. And we need your support. We need your help. We need your help in getting people to read us. And you know, any other ways we can partner to tell the true stories of the issues that are happening and need attention, not just on climate, but it's affecting every arena. Thank you.